So can you please raise your hand? Okay, we've got a colleague from Taiwan.
Hi, my name is Yan Li. I reported for Initial Media from Hong Kong. And I have a question here. I've talked to several delegates from smaller developing countries, and they admitted that SDI is still something pretty new to them, and they honestly have no idea how to really deal with it. So I'm just wondering, is it difficult to communicate as a scientist body? Is it difficult to communicate with these delegates on the DSI issue? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think maybe for many people, the topic is a little bit difficult. I think we're talking about digital sequence information, right, on genetic resources. So, as you know, under the convention, and then as further developed under the Nagoya Protocol, we have, as the third objective of the convention, equal with the objectives on conservation and sustainable use, this third objective, which is to ensure the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits from the use of genetic resources. So that if we take genetic resources from a certain country or from a certain local community, and then develop, say, drugs or advanced cultivars of agricultural plants or other products that can be sold, then the benefits from that, a fair and equitable share of them, should return to the countries and communities. And I think it's fair to say, this has been quite a challenging, under the convention and the Nagoya Protocol to put this in place. What we're seeing now, of course, is a lot of that genetic information is being digitized and put in databases which are shared internationally. And of course, on the one hand, this is a very good thing because it means that that information is available to scientists worldwide. Often it's not only the individual sequence that's important, but actually comparing different sequences. But it means, of course, you're short-circuiting the access to that information, and that means it's much more difficult for the country or community concerned to control the access and ensure they get the benefits. And this is an issue here in the convention, but it's also relevant in what's happening in FAO and the International Treaty on Genetic Resources. It's also relevant to what's happening in WHO now and the discussions on access to pathogens, but also access to vaccines and therapeutics and diagnostics that are developed from the genetic sequence of those pathogens. So that's the issue, and that's why it is important. Perhaps sometimes people can be blinded by the science, as it were, and these things are moving very, very quickly. It's challenging to address how this will be, this issue, this conundrum will be solved. How can we maintain access to those genetic sequences? We don't want to hinder science. We don't want to hinder development of new crops, new drugs. But how can we ensure at the same time that the benefits go back to the countries and the communities so that they then also have the incentives and the means to continue to protect them and maintain them rather than allowing those to be destroyed through other means. So those discussions are taking place here in this meeting. It's in Contact Group 5, and that starts, at this meeting that starts tonight. Good progress was made in Geneva. Actually, I think everyone was pleasantly surprised how much progress was made, given the range of interest that we see among different countries. But obviously, we rely on you guys also to help explain this and to get this out to the different communities and countries.
Great, thank you very much. Stella.
Hi, I'm Stella Paul from Arts Journalism Network, and I would request you to just explain a little bit about the process when the COP shifts from one location to other. So we understand that China remains the presidency. So how actually is what's going to be how the different role that the host country and the presidency will play in this. And yesterday we heard the CBD executive secretary say that there is a financial shortfall and for this meeting as well. So are there any such shortfalls expected for the COP? And if yes, how are you expecting those to be? Who's actually coming forward to ensure that everything is taken care of? Thank you.
Right. So, as David mentioned earlier, the default location for our meetings is Montreal because that's where the Secretariat is based, and Canada, as the host country of the Secretariat, as part of our agreement, provides facilities for meetings when needed. So that's really the role, the basic role of the Government of Canada is to ensure that we can have the facilities so that this meeting can go ahead. So in terms of the chairing of the meeting, of the facilitation of the negotiations, and of hosting or convening the high-level segment of ministers, this will still remain fully the responsibility of China. Of course, China, in their capacity as president of the Conference of the Parties, and they are guided by all the other parties, and particularly through the Bureau, in carrying out those responsibilities. But under the authority of Minister Huang, the COP15 president, he may well invite other ministers to help him in facilitating those negotiations. So those things don't change. The basic role of Canada as host, as I say, is to provide those facilities. But of course, with the COP taking place in Canada, there are many opportunities for Canada, for the province of Quebec, for the city of Montreal, to also convene events, receptions, some of the parallel events that may happen as well. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see Canada, Quebec and Montreal playing a significant role there, which of course can also very much help the negotiations as well, indirectly. But the formal process remains under the presidency of China. In terms of the finances, this is a decision that was made recently, so it's really at early stages. We're confident that between the host country and the other parties, we'll be able to raise the funds that are needed to ensure that the meeting goes ahead. Separately from that, we raise funds from different parties to support the participation of delegates from developing countries and countries with economies in transition, and especially the least developed countries and the small island development states, as well as some representatives of indigenous peoples and local communities. So we will also be calling out to parties to support that as well, so we can make sure that all countries can be reasonably well represented in the process.
Great, thank you very much for your question. Do you have another question?
Great.
We have a couple of so here, and then come back to our colleague after that. Thanks.
My name is Imelda from Urchanism Network. I just would like to follow up on the question on finance. Would you know where we are right now, and do we have the numbers, and how can we ensure that the resources are flowing? Thank you.
So, for these current meetings, we still have to raise another $450,000 to support the costs that we've incurred for these meetings, and so we're looking to the parties to provide that. For the COP itself, the budget that the Conference of the Parties adopts is quite limited. It's So the budget that was set back in 2018 in Sharm el-Sheikh for COP15 is 1.8 million for the COP. That's not enough to cover the cost. It's been much higher than that. Some of those costs we can estimate because we're looking at, we know what facilities need to be in place. Other costs, for example, those related to security, those related to providing local transport, these are provided directly by the host country. We don't necessarily know those costs. In terms of the funds we have for supporting participation, at this meeting, we supported the highest number ever for an intersessional meeting, for a meeting other than a COP itself, 240 delegates. We have some funds remaining. I don't have the figures on my fingertips. We have some funds remaining in that fund, which we'll use to support participation in COP15, but we will need to raise a lot more money for that. And we'll probably need about $2 million for that. For the fund for participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities, we're in quite good shape already, and we believe that we will be able to fund a reasonable number, and we will be consulting with the IPLC community in determining the use of that support.
Great, thanks very much. Oops. Thank you very much. We have a question in the back. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. This is Harold from Earth Journalism Network. I expect you are aware of the Sri Lanka's economic situation now. Due to this situation, what are the challenges Sri Lanka facing to achieving these goals?
So, yes, it's difficult to comment directly on the specific cases in Sri Lanka, but we know that, yes, Sri Lanka is facing particularly difficult economic situation at the moment. Of course, we see actually many countries around the world, right, facing problems. One in relation to COVID and the fiscal issues because of funds spent supporting workers and others during the COVID pandemic, during the lockdowns, and so on. The need to reinvest in the economy, and this has led to maybe some fiscal problems. And now, of course, we know there are cost of living issues because of the increase in the cost of fuel and also food. So I think to different degrees, for sure, most countries share these problems. I think what we can say is that we know from analysis done that in looking at COVID recovery programs, for instance, but also looking at how we respond to this crisis of energy prices right now, there are choices as to whether each country will continue to invest, for example, on energy in fossil fuels or in renewables. And when we look at COVID recovery plans, there's many opportunities to invest in biodiversity, for example, in ecosystem restoration, in green infrastructure, that can also help to generate jobs and therefore also help to promote the economy. So, so far, we see, unfortunately, most countries not really taking that greener route, but there is a potential to do so. And I think that would apply to all countries. And it's if we're going to be serious about reaching the 2050 vision and the 2030 goals before that are being negotiated now, clearly we have to see changes across economies in the way resources are invested.
Great, thank you very much, David. Do we have another question? We do. We want to go over here.
Hi, my name is Tantalma from Mongolia, also fellow of Earth Journalism Network. So in this conference and convention, and growing biodiversity, communication is crucial. So especially, I think it's young engagement. So how are you working with supporting young participation, especially decision-making process? Thank you.
So we do try to provide space for youth organisations through the Global Youth Biodiversity Network and others in our meetings, as you know. We're looking actually to work with the host government in Montreal, in Quebec, and also through support from the government of Japan to find funds to support the participation of greater numbers of youth in COP15 Part 2, and also perhaps in preparatory work as well. For sure, the 2050 vision in particular, but also the 2030 goals are most relevant to youth. And therefore the voice of youth is key, I think, in ensuring that political leaders now give these issues the attention they need. So we will do our best to work with the youth community to promote their engagement in this process, and so that their voice can be heard.
I'll just add a comment. I mean, you'll notice I just put up on the screen here a press event that'll be held tomorrow by the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, and that'll be an example of how youth who's actually engaged in the convention process are providing comment and inputs on the different issues. So you can also arrange for you to talk to members of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network as well. Thanks. I think we've got enough time for one more question. Dave, we can do this for 2 more minutes. Right over here.
Hi, I'm from Pakistan. I'm here from Art Journalism Network. My name is Imran Khan. My question is, all the EG targets have been achieved by CBD or not? If not, so the missing targets will be included in the biodiversity framework drafts or not?
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch the first part of
The first part is just that, so have the IG targets been achieved,
Mhm.
and if the ones that have not been achieved, how are they included in the first one?
Right, that's a very good question, because we see, if we look at the IG targets and we look at the draft of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, of course, there's a lot of continuity there. Many of those targets are still there, and because they were not achieved or not fully achieved by 2020 doesn't mean that they're not important. They are important. One thing we've been trying to do is urge parties in this gap, because of the delay due to COVID. The actual targets are still relevant until we have the new targets. If we look at the actual targets, yes, none of them were fully met, but there was a lot of progress to a lot of those targets. I mean, we know, for example, we're inches away from achieving the targets on 17% and 10% of land and sea coverage through protected areas. And probably if we had better information on the other effective conservation measures, we would be even beyond those targets, at least on land. We know that there was a lot of progress in some countries on reducing rates of deforestation, for instance. In some countries we saw progress, and then unfortunately we saw a reversal of progress. But one key message from this is where governments take action, we do see results. And I think that is a key conclusion. It was a key conclusion of the 5th edition of the Global Biodiversity Outlook, which did this analysis in 2020, that where governments invest, we do see results. And this isn't whether this is about reducing rates of deforestation, whether it's about stopping extinctions of the species on the verge of extinction, whether it's about improving fisheries management, for instance, or addressing invasive alien species. And we also saw some good progress on some elements of the targets needed to support implementation, for instance. There was a target sub-target to target 20 on financial resources that was negotiated in COP11 in Hyderabad to double overseas aid funding for biodiversity, international finance for biodiversity by 2015, and then maintain it to 2020. That target was met, or that sub-target was met. So but these targets definitely remain important. The fact that the Aichi targets were not fully met, on the other hand, really emphasizes, I think there's two other key lessons from that experience. One is we can't afford a delay after the adoption of the global biodiversity framework. We need action starting immediately. And that's why we work with the GEF, UNDP, and UNEP to put in place early on some early action grants to help countries identify their new targets and update their national biodiversity strategies and action plans. So those resources will be available immediately. And the other, and perhaps more fundamental lesson is you have to address the underlying drivers. So we have to address the economic and other factors that influence the behavior of governments, of companies, of people, and of course subsidies is one key issue among those.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, David. Unfortunately, David's got to go to manage the parts of the meeting. So thank you very, very much, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to see us, David. So letting all of you know who are in the room and those online is we'll have the next press conference at 11 a.m. It'll be a press briefing by the Campaign for Nature. So we'll see you there. And those of you in the room, I want to encourage you to come to this information session on science. And then immediately after that session, as David pointed out, we'll have some of these experts available to speak to you directly. So thanks very much, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks, David. Thanks, everyone. That's